In my humble opinion, Breaking Bad is the greatest show ever made. I was originally going to do a tier list series on that series, but I'm not allowed to talk about it on here, unfortunately. But because its prequel follow-up, Better Call Saul, is more tame, I am allowed to talk about it on here. I'm going to be going through every episode of the show and ranking them on a tier list, going over what I liked and very rarely disliked about each and every one of them. Season 1, Episode 1, Uno. The episode begins in black and white, about 1 to 2 months after the ending of Breaking Bad, with Saul, or as he's now known, Gene, mundanely following the words he said in the episode Granite State.
From here on out, I'm Mr. Low Profile, just another douchebag with a job and 3 pairs of Dockers. If I'm lucky, a month from now, best case scenario, I'm managing a Cinnabon in Omaha.
As he goes home, he almost cries as he watches his old Better Call Saul commercials, with the TV reflecting in his glasses in full color. This isn't the last time I'll bring up the cinematography, because my god is incredible in this show. We're then taken back to the past where Saul, or at this point in time, Jimmy, defends 3 teenagers for cutting off the head of a dead body and having sex with it, and later meets with his 2 new clients named Betsy and Craig Kettleman, who are suspected of stealing $1.6 million, but they claim they haven't actually stolen it and that the people on the news are As Jimmy drives home from the restaurant, Jimmy walks out, and 2 bozo skateboarders ask Jimmy for money, and say that if he doesn't give them money, they'll call the police. But Jimmy calls them out for pulling a scam on him, as they quickly run away. Jimmy goes to his office, finding a check for $1,000, but rips it up. The guy who gave him this check, and a main member of the HHM board, Howard Hamlin, gets a verbal beatdown from Jimmy, as Jimmy doesn't like how he handed him an extremely low amount of money, showcasing the show's masterful cinematography once again. Jimmy walks out, realizing that Betsy and Craig ended up taking Howard as their lawyer, and beats the crap out of a nearby trash can, before sharing a cigarette with a member of the board, Kim Wexler, in this iconic Better Call Saul shot. We learn about Jimmy's brother Chuck's condition with electricity, and Jimmy then has a talk with the skateboard twins, giving them the full story of his Slip-N' Jimmy past, as it's revealed that Jimmy pulled multiple slip and fall schemes when he was younger, and requests for them to pull their same scheme on the Kettleman so he can win them back. They successfully crash into the car, but the car immediately drives away. The twins follow the car, and the lady walking out turns out to be very old, not speaking English. Jimmy learns about the situation and decides to take matters into his own hands.
Open up, officer of the court! Open up in the name of the law! Good afternoon,
Oh god. This episode is shockingly great and sets up the tone for the rest of the show perfectly. I'd argue it to be pretty close to the level of Breaking Bad's pilot, and that's saying something. This one's getting a very strong A tier for me. Season 1, Episode 2, Mijo. The episode starts off with showing us the ending of the previous episode, but from Tuco's perspective.
The crazy old biznatch who ran over my brother.
Unfortunately, even though Tuco knows his grandma just broke someone's leg and committed a felony, he isn't too happy about the twins calling his grandma
biznatch.
So he tells the grandma to walk upstairs and turn her TV up really loud so she can't hear what's happening downstairs. Oh yeah, just turn the volume up so you can enjoy the TV more. I'm totally not gonna almost kill these guys.
Mounts for what you did. No.
Biznatch.
Tuco cleans up the salsa he spilled on the carpet, and here's Jimmy knocking on the door. I love how Jimmy's movements exactly match the one he made in episode 1, and sync timelines are very important when it comes to this stuff. Anyways, Jimmy uses his quick bag of tricks to try and convince Tuco to keep them both alive, but it doesn't work out. Sorry, I should have given a spoiler warning. Tuco allows Jimmy to cut the twins from their shackles, but one of the twins ends up throwing him under the bus because he's a
biznatch.
Tuco takes them out to the desert, and Jimmy continues to tell Tuco it was all a misunderstanding, and that Tuco's grandma unfortunately drives a car awfully similar to the Kettlemobile. But because Tuco is a
biznatch,
he doesn't believe Jimmy's story about the Kettlemans, thinking Jimmy was punking his grandma. So Jimmy lies, saying he's working with the FBI. But one of Tuco's partners, Nacho, sees through this.
The task force is designated Operation Kingbreaker.
Kingbreaker?
That makes me the king! Woohoo!
Jimmy drops the act and begs them to let him go along with the twins.
They walked into my house. They disrespected my abuelita.
They called her Biznatch! And they just walk, they just walk, Biznatch, that. They called her that.
As Jimmy is let free, he tries to convince Tuco to, instead of killing the twins, just break one leg each in this amazing and incredibly intense scene. And Jimmy is forced to listen to him brutally breaking both of their legs, celebrating and going wild after each one. This entire first half of the episode is easily one of the most riveting things in the entire first season. The acting and writing with Jimmy trying to convince Tuco not to kill the twins is just so well crafted that it could make even the most cold-hearted of people piss their pants. Anyways, the twins' legs breaking brings Jimmy PTSD later in the day, as he tries to go on a date but hears a guy cracking crackers in half, reminding him of the legs being broken, so he decides to get wasted and completely forgets about it. Chuck is upset that Jimmy left his cell phone in the house, even though none of what Chuck is saying makes any sense, considering Chuck threw Jimmy's phone outside hours ago, but he's still complaining that the phone is giving him an insanely hard time because of his symptoms with electricity. We then get our first amazing montage of the show, with Jimmy going about his day-to-day life as a lawyer, getting mad about stickers, and making some friends in the bathroom.
Petty was a prior. 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 Petty was a prior.
Later, Nacho meets with Jimmy, wanting to finish off what Jimmy started in ripping off the Kettlemans.
I like ripping off thieves because they can't go to the cops. They have no recourse. You already tried ripping them off. I'm gonna finish what you started. For when you figure out you're in the game.
This episode is awesome. I love the introduction of Nacho, and that first half in general is just so riveting. I'm proud to say that this episode is getting the honor of being the first S tier on the list. Season 1, Episode 3, Nacho. This episode begins with a flashback to the days of Slippin' Jimmy, where Jimmy in his disgusting haircut is in prison for his Chicago sunroof incident, something that we'll get to learn about in approximately 5 hours and 48 minutes, where Jimmy is basically like, hey man, it's great to see you, you know. Your eyes look amazing. Oh, also apparently I'm a sex offender, so can you be my lawyer? Thanks, bye. Jimmy accidentally tells Kim that the Kettlemans might be in danger on the phone, but covers it up saying he's drunk and isn't paying attention to what he's saying. Jimmy then takes that toilet paper thingy and calls the Kettlemans like 50 times until they pick up.
Kettlemans, you're in danger. You're in danger.
I'm sorry, what?
This is a warning. You're in danger. Kettlemans, you're in danger. They're coming for your money. Bye.
The next day, even though it's urgent, Mike doesn't let Jimmy through to go to the Kettle house because of the amount of stickers Jimmy has. So Jimmy illegally allows himself through. Jimmy drives to the Kettle house as he learns from Howard that there was a home invasion. There was apparently a home invasion. Kim is now extra sussy about Jimmy, since he literally told her the night before they got kidnapped that they were in danger, but Jimmy says it was all just a coincidence. After Jimmy calls Nacho like 50 times and gets no response, he gets in the car and notices two people approaching him. So he gets out and calmly starts walking away from them without a worry in the world. Oh, oops. As he gets caught, the guys chasing him are revealed to be the police, and they start to handcuff him as he tells them he's an attorney. He realizes Nacho didn't pick up because he was in custody and wanted Jimmy as his lawyer. Jimmy tells him all the flaws with what he did, as Nacho was parked right outside the Kettle house with blood on the floor of his car, which is pretty idiotic to do if you're gonna invade that house. But Nacho reveals he never actually went inside, thinking Jimmy actually set him up, and that the blood on the floor was from the skateboard twins. Kim has a talk with Jimmy, and Jimmy tells her he didn't know he was representing the lead suspect, but that he guarantees Nacho didn't do it. They let Jimmy investigate the house with them, and Jimmy notices that the daughter's doll is missing, which means they would have had to have willingly left the house and gone somewhere. Jimmy then confesses to Kim outside that he did warn them about how they were in danger.
To warn them? Anonymously, you did. Oh God, you didn't do the sex robot voice, did you?
I did.
Oh man, this is such a powerful scene with Jimmy confessing to his awful, terrible crimes. It's so hard to watch a man do this to himself, knowing he'll be put in jail. So let's cleanse our palate and watch Mike physically abuse him. Yay! Jimmy is now for real about to go to jail for abuse, because Mike definitely wasn't the one who abused him. But Mike changes his mind, since he actually believes Jimmy's story about the Kettlemans kettle-napping themselves. Shut up, Google, it's a word! Jimmy begins his adventurous journey to find the Kettlemans, and after a hard day of searching, he finds them like 2 blocks away from their house.
Here's Johnny!
Jimmy holds the duffel bag of money in his hand, and as Betsy tries to steal it, she eventually rips it as her children get exposed to the violent criminal that she really is. This is another solid episode. Lots of stuff happened and progressed in this one, and that ending scene is hilarious. Giving this one an A tier. Season 1, Episode 4. Hero. We get another flashback to the days of Slippin' Jimmy, where he and this random dude exit a bar.
Bro, I never did catch your name.
Saul.
Saul?
It's all good, man. Get it?
They then come across a wallet laying on the floor along with not a wallet laying on the floor. The random dude ends up taking off with some of the money along with a watch that he thinks is extremely expensive, causing him to think he's getting most of the money instead of Jimmy. But the not a wallet lying on the floor decides to respawn himself, revealing that the whole thing was him and Jimmy's scheme. This not a wallet is named Marco, Jimmy's close friend and someone we'll get to learn about a lot in the future. We're taken back to the moment Jimmy caught the Kettlemans, where he scolds them for almost ruining someone's life, and asks to be their lawyer before they drop an unbelievable diss on him.
Just what?
You're the kind of lawyer guilty people hire.
The next day, Jimmy ends up actually having the stickers as he asks Mike if the story of the Kettlemans was on the paper, saying that the fact that certain criminals are this dumb breaks his heart. Jimmy tells the police to take the handcuffs off of Nacho, but Nacho still thinks Jimmy ratted him out. It's revealed that Jimmy took the Kettlemans' bribe, where they gave him money to not tell anyone about their camping trip, and he gets a makeover using that money. Why, you ask? Well, if you take one look at the billboard that was actually put up in Albuquerque, well, yeah, this is a blatant copy-pasting of Howard's billboard, which makes Howard extremely upset. Kim warns him that he should really take that billboard down, since it could cause major trouble for the future of Jimmy Goodman. Oh shoot, I mean Saul McGill. Oh shoot, I mean Solly Takovic. What? But Jimmy fires back, saying she should quit HHM to work somewhere that she's actually appreciated. After a debacle with the judge and Howard, though, he's forced to take it down in the next 48 hours.
If they want to fight, they're going to get a fight. Because I'm not giving up. Holy sh**, dude! The dude! Dude, the dude!
Jimmy climbs up to the top of the billboard and saves the guy from getting a really bad concussion. Jimmy's then interviewed on the news, which pisses off Howard even more as he thinks that
whole thing's a damn stunt.
But I think my clients know that when they're in trouble, just a guy who's in the right.
Unfortunately, Jimmy's on Chuck's newspaper, and he doesn't want Chuck finding out he ran another con, so he gives Chuck a different newspaper. Chuck is too desperate for his normal newspaper, though, and, Guys, I think Chuck might like his Albuquerque newspaper a lot. While this episode isn't as great as what came before, it's still really good, giving it a B tier bordering on an A tier. Season 1, Episode 5. Alpine Shepherd Boy. Two cops arrive at Chuck's house after his neighbor reported him. He refuses to open the door due to his condition, as one of the officers walk to the back door, finding that the breaker lines have been cut and cans of camp fuel lie on the ground. They suspect Chuck is a druggie, and as Chuck lectures them about probable cause like a little baby, they kick down the front door, causing him to die. The sound design in every scene with Chuck and his condition is incredible, and it always makes you feel what Chuck is feeling, and in this case it's absolutely no exception. Thanks to the billboard stunt, Jimmy is getting a lot of potential business. He approaches this stupid client who literally wants to pay Jimmy his own currency, so Jimmy says bye-bye and runs away. We then get the greatest scene in television history, where this dude has invented a toilet that spouts encouraging phrases to kids as they #do their business.
Fill me up, Chandler. Put it in me. Give it to me, Chandler. I want it all.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that one, you know? Jimmy and the dude eventually get into a huge fight on the matter, and the dude ends up chasing Jimmy out of his house. Finally, Jimmy visits Mrs. Strauss, an elderly woman who collects porcelain Hummel figurines. Phew! Finally, someone sane out of all these clients.
Aren't you a spicy one? Well, if I were 40 years younger, I'd have you buy me a pina colada.
What the hell is wrong with these people? Kim suggests that Jimmy could genuinely have a future in elder law, and Jimmy considers this for a moment, but is interrupted when Howard calls Kim to tell her about Chuck. At the hospital, Chuck's physician ends up proving that Chuck's condition is all in his head, as she activates Chuck's hospital bed without him even noticing or showing any symptoms. However, Jimmy has no intentions of committing Chuck for psychiatric evaluation, and decides he's gonna take Chuck home. Seeing the newspaper with Jimmy on it is on the ground. He confronts Chuck, stating that Chuck's symptoms always seem to worsen when he thinks Jimmy is slipping back into his ways as Slippin' Jimmy. Haha, slipping. get it. But Chuck's symptoms magically start to go away as Jimmy says this, realizing that maybe he isn't slipping Jimmy after all. Jimmy visits a retirement home dressed as Andy Griffith, shaking hands of all his elder clients as they eat cups of Jell-O that have a new slogan printed on the bottom. Obviously, the name Alpine Shepherd Boy sticks out when compared to all the blank O titles for the rest of the season. And the reason for that is this episode was originally going to be titled Jell-O, but the Jell-O company got mad and they had to change the name last minute. It's pretty hilarious when looking at all the titles how this one just sticks out so much from the rest, but whatever. At night, Mike receives an unexpected visit from a pair of detectives.
It's a long way from home, aren't you?
You and me both.
I'm genuinely surprised at how much hate this one gets. Another high B tier. Season 1, Episode 6. 5-0. The episode begins with a flashback of Mike arriving in Albuquerque, waiting for his daughter-in-law to pick him up. He applies a maxi pad from the woman's restroom's vending machine to a fresh bullet wound on his shoulder. At Stacy's house, Mike tells Stacy he's gonna stay in town indefinitely to help her out, as well as Kaylee. She tells him she overheard her husband Matt having a heated late-night phone conversation right before his death, but Mike denies being the one on the other end of the call. Mike then goes to a veterinarian named Dr. Caldera to stitch up his wound. Back in the present, Mike sits in an interrogation room opposite two detectives from the Philly Police Department, and though he's not under arrest, he demands Jimmy to be brought in to represent him. Jimmy arrives with a cup of coffee, which Mike instructs him to spill on one of the detectives. The detectives tell Jimmy and Mike about how Mike was a cop in Philadelphia for nearly 30 years, and his son, Matt, a rookie, was killed 9 months previously. His two partners, Hoffman and Fensky, were ambushed 2 times, and the second time they didn't make it out alive. The detectives think Hoffman and Fensky were involved in corrupt activities, and they ask Mike to shed some light on what happened, but Mike tells them he saw them the night they were killed, but claims he didn't see anything more. Mike studies the detective's notes about the case. How did he get the notebook? Well, if you take a closer look at the previous scene, you might notice that Jimmy actually ended up spilling all the coffee on the detectives, and Mike was able to snatch the notebook without the detectives noticing. Mike then goes to Stacy's house to confront her about summoning the detectives. She explains that she called them after discovering a large amount of cash hidden in the lining of a suitcase, making her think Matt was involved in something criminal.
He wasn't dirty! God damn you! You get that through your head! My son wasn't dirty!
We're taken to a flashback 3 months earlier, where Mike walks up to Hoffman and Fensky.
I know it was you.
After the bar closes, Hoffman and Fensky give Mike a free Uber ride, with no option to decline, snatching his gun away from him. They ask Mike what he meant when he said what he said, and Mike tells him he's gonna prove the fact that they killed Matt. The cops pull over, as Mike stashes a gun he hid earlier under his jacket. The two cops devise a plan to kill Mike and to frame it as a suicide.
Smart. That's what I would have done if I were you.
We're now back in the present, where Mike decides to visit Stacy and tell her everything that happened. He explains how even he was a corrupt cop, but Matt wasn't. Hoffman offered Matt a cut of the dirty money, and Matt wasn't certain, so he called Mike for advice. This was the phone call that Stacy overheard, where Mike told him that not taking the money would cause distrust and would eventually get him killed. He also admitted to his son that he was dirty as well, something that crushed Matt. He eventually took the money, but due to his hesitation, Hoffman and Fensky ended up killing him to protect themselves.
He put me up on a pedestal, and I had to show him that I was down in the gutter with the rest of them. Broke my boy. I broke my boy.
If they killed Maddie, who killed them?
You know what happened. The question is, can you live with it?
S tier, not even a second thought. Season 1, Episode 7. Bingo. Jimmy returns the notebook to the detectives, claiming that he found it at the parking lot, but one of the detectives sees right through Jimmy's scheme, threatening him with jail time. Mike leaves the station and finds Jimmy trying to ask him if Mike will need a lawyer, but he tells Jimmy to However, Jimmy has no time for because he goes home to find Chuck standing outside trying to face his electric fears. Anyways, Chuck lasts like 2 seconds and ends up telling Jimmy that his goal is to slowly build up a tolerance to electromagnetic fields so he can return to work. Jimmy takes Kim to an awesome office space that he's looking to share with Kim, but she turns him down, stating that she's too invested in HHM to leave. This makes Jimmy extremely happy and not depressed at all. I mean, just look at his smiling face. It's even inspired me to become more of a happy camper myself. Now, in all seriousness, the scene is actually really sad, and you can definitely feel Jimmy's pain and emotion he has while watching this. Kim makes a deal to the Kettlemans that their sentence in prison is going to be lowered from 30 years to 16 months, if they apologize for stealing the money and give it back. And the Kettlemans accept this offer because they're both really smart people. They didn't accept the offer, did they?
You're fired.
Jimmy has officially started doing bingo games for his older clients, and we got our first appearance of Irene, someone who will become very important in the show moving forward.
Irene, I love kitties. I have 2 Siamese cats, Oscar and Felix. Felix can wash himself.
Irene's beautiful and emotional monologue about her cats is interrupted though, as Jimmy gets a call from Betsy, who meets with Jimmy to tell him they're acquiring his legal services again, but Jimmy tells him he's now specializing in elder law. Betsy doesn't back down though, and after a call with Kim, Jimmy does his best to point them towards her, but they decline and he reluctantly takes the case. As it turns out, Kim has been demoted to an office in a distant part of the HHM building, which is a punishment for losing the Kettlemans. He meets her in the parking lot and apologizes, and Kim rants about how stupid the Kettlemans are. Jimmy enlists the help of Mike and sprays a liquid on the cash taken from Jimmy's bribe, which he plants outside of the Kettle House. The Kettlemans find it, assuming it came from embezzled money, and they add it to the rest of their cash. Mike then breaks in and uses a backlight to trace the money to a bathroom cabinet. He leaves with the cash, and Jimmy has him deliver it to the district attorney. Mike tells Jimmy that completing this task satisfies the debt he owes for Jimmy's aid in stealing the notebook from the detective. Jimmy visits the Kettlemans as they discover their money is missing.
Wait, how could you... Betsy?
No. What did you do with it?
She tries threatening to reveal that Jimmy is also guilty, but Jimmy tells them how stupid that is considering they were the ones that bribed him. The Kettlemans agree to Jimmy's plea deal, deciding that only one parent going to prison is their best option so that the kids won't grow up alone. Unfortunately, Jimmy is now unable to afford a new workspace, so he goes back to his office and has a breakdown.
Law offices of James M. McGill, how may I direct your call?
Hi, do you guys have any toilet paper? Toilet paper. I need some right now.
This one is really good. High A tier. Season 1, Episode 8. RICO. The episode opens with another blueberry-colored cold open of the show, where Jimmy is working in the HHM mailroom when he receives a notice that he passed the state bar exam. He's hyped out of his mind like his dad just bought him a DVD of Whiplash for his birthday, so he tells Chuck.
Wow. I don't know what to say.
Are you proud of me?
Yes.
He asks Chuck if he could hire him as a lawyer, but later, Howard tells Jimmy that the firm won't hire him, but that he promises to re-examine his application in 6 months. Jimmy is suspicious when a client mentions that her nursing home, Sandpiper Crossing, controls her pension and social security payments while only providing her a monthly allowance. His suspicions only grow as he begins collecting invoices from other residents, and him and Chuck analyze them, finding evidence of that same nursing home systematically overcharging residents. Chuck encourages Jimmy to keep investigating, but as he tries doing so, he's stopped at Sandpiper's front desk, preventing him from seeing clients. He hears papers being shredded and goes to a bathroom to hastily write on paper a demand letter for Sandpiper to stop destroying evidence, but it doesn't go well.
Official, right? If you don't stop shredding right now, that's destruction of evidence. Spoliation, that's what it's called. And it's a felony, so call your lawyers right now. Tell them I said that. Me, James McGill, Esquire. I'm telling you guys, big mistake!
Later that night, Jimmy looks through Sandpiper's dumpsters for shredded papers, and Chuck and Jimmy sort through the shreds and piece together an incriminating document. Chuck decides to become Jimmy's co-counsel, and Sandpiper's attorney agree to a meeting. Mike becomes the ultimate babysitter, comparing with the likes of Steve Harrington, and Stacy returns from work, asking Mike what to do with the money from her suitcase. Mike says she should use it to do something good for herself and her daughter, but Stacy says that even if she does, she won't have enough to cover living expenses. And later that night, Mike returns to Dr. Caldera to follow up on his previous offer of illegal work from 5-0. Sandpiper's attorneys deny the company is defrauding residents, but they do concede that some might have been a little overcharged. Just a tiny bit. The company offers $100,000 in compensation, but Jimmy presents evidence that their fraud makes them eligible. But Jimmy presents evidence that their fraud makes them eligible for a RICO case. Chuck demands they pay the $20 million to settle, which their attorneys refuse. Later, Chuck is preoccupied with preparing for their case. So preoccupied that he casually leaves his house to retrieve documents from Jimmy's car. Oh my god, was everything all in his head? What? No. This episode is pretty great, with some standout moments, especially the ending scene, giving it a B tier. Season 1, Episode 9. Pimento. Oh wait, you already know this episode. I don't have to talk about it. I'll just play the whole thing right here.
How to make a pimento cheese sandwich. Buy yourself some pimento cheese and some white bread. You take 2 slices of bread and you spread the correct amount of cheese, like so. Then you close and you're done. Congratulations.
Now, what really happens in this episode is Jimmy and Chuck sit on a bench outside the house, hot off the tails of the RICO ending, but Chuck isn't able to fully enjoy it because he's an idiot. One of Sandpiper's attorneys attempt to obtain a restraining order in court, barring Jimmy from their property, but Jimmy prevents this from being approved. He returns to Chuck's house and finds that Sandpiper's attorneys have resorted to a document dump. Chuck suggests referring the case to HHM, and Jimmy is reluctant at first because, it's HHM, but he eventually arranges a meeting. While Jimmy is asleep though, Chuck uses Jimmy's phone to make a mysterious call, even though the electricity is causing him pain. Well, whatever, that doesn't sound important. Hopefully we don't have to worry about that scene ever again. Mike has received a job offer to bodyguard this guy named Price, who wants to sell pills stolen from his employer. One of the bodyguards mocks Mike for not carrying any weapons, only a pimento sandwich for lunch. He dares Mike to disarm him, which Mike easily does.
What the... Son of a...
The scene is awesome. Howard offers Jimmy 20% of the final settlement and a $20,000 of counsel fee, but says that Jimmy won't continue working on the case. Howard doesn't give any reason as to why, and Jimmy lashes out at Howard.
Pig f***er.
Kim confronts Howard, and he resists telling her the reason for what he did.
The next time that you want to come in here and tell me what I'm doing wrong, you are welcome to keep it to yourself, because I don't care. Stop. Close the door. I don't care.
Price is a complete freaking idiot, so Mike has to coach him on how to hand over the pills. And Nacho hands over the cash. Price realizes the payment is $20 short, and Mike calmly insists that Nacho pay in full. As they leave, Mike delivers an amazing monologue, telling Price he had researched Nacho's position and knew not to take a gun. At night, Kim suggests Jimmy take Howard's offer, which would let Jimmy start his own firm, but he rejects this advice. However, Jimmy realizes that Chuck used his phone the night before, and the next day, he informs Chuck that he will accept Howard's deal. He deduces that Chuck was using Howard to keep Jimmy out of HHM, and demands to know why Chuck was working against him.
You're not a real lawyer. I worked my ass off to get where I am. And you take these shortcuts and you think suddenly you're my peer? I committed my life to this.
Chuck tells Jimmy that he was more proud of him when he got a job in the mailroom, and that Jimmy will never change.
You're slipping Jimmy. Slipping Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun.
This episode was already pretty great, but the last 10 minutes immediately boost this one up to an S tier. That scene is genuinely one of the most heartbreaking in the entire show in my book, considering how much Jimmy worked to not only be a lawyer, but to take care of Chuck, only to realize he was working against him the whole time. Season 1, Episode 10, Marco. Phew, we finally made it to the last episode of season 1. The episode opens with a flashback to when Jimmy was released from jail as he moves back to Albuquerque to live an honest life and to stop being a criminal. Before leaving Cicero, though, he goes to his favorite bar to say goodbye to Marco, his partner throughout his Slippy Jimin days. Wait, crap, I messed that up. Jimmy gives the Sandpiper case to HHM, and Howard also apologizes for his involvement in Chuck sabotaging Jimmy's career, giving him $20,000. He also has a nice talk with Kim, as Kim says he's mature for the way he's handling this situation. We then get this great scene of Jimmy hosting another bingo session where he gets an improbable string of numbers beginning with B, reminding of his brother's betrayal. He proceeds to rant about his Chicago sunroof incident, where he defecated through the sunroof of a guy he wanted to get revenge on, not realizing his children were in the back seat. Bob Odenkirk's acting in this scene is amazing. Jimmy then returns to Cicero and reunites with Marco, and they run a scam on an unsuspecting businessman, getting addicted to it like Walt Jr. to breakfast, and they end up spending several days running cons. At the end of the week, though, Jimmy explains to Marco that he's an attorney and has to return to Albuquerque to see his clients, but Marco convinces Jimmy to stay for one last con. However, while running the scam, Marco unfortunately suffers from a heart attack and dies. Jimmy tries desperately to bring him back, but has no luck. This scene hit me like a truck the first time I watched it, and it comes out of absolutely nowhere, but it's so freaking depressing. Kim calls Jimmy to report that the Sandpiper case has grown too big for HHM, requiring them to partner with Davis and Maine, and that the firm is interested in hiring him. Jimmy arranges to meet with the Davis and Maine partners at the courthouse, but changes his mind and drives away. Why did he do this, you ask? Well, we'll find out next episode. Executive producers Vince Gilligan and Peter Gold. This episode, while not as good as Pimento, is still a very good end to the season. The bingo scene is amazing, of course, and I really like the focus on Marco, and the way his story concludes is just sad. Overall, this episode is getting an A tier. An amazing end to an amazing season. A lot of people think season 1 of Better Call Saul is one of the weakest in the show, and while I agree, I still think it's awesome. The entire season is extremely fun and entertaining, with some absolutely standout episodes along the way. Seeing the origins of all these characters is extremely interesting to watch, considering the fact that we know where some of them end up, and we also don't know where some of them end up. Season 1 improved so much for me on rewatch, and I genuinely wasn't expecting to love it this much, but after watching the entire show, I appreciate everything here a lot more. Anyways, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe